and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to the Dark Shops. Sorry for basically falling off the void again, but as you know here, we run about as well as Penn Central did back in the day. So, just about how things go. Now, if you remember my 4th of July video from a month ago, you have seen something snuck into the background. And by snuck, I mean chucked astrew, as if something like a tornado picked them up and threw them around. Those things are these. Now, as I'm sure you probably wondered what I've been doing in the background with all my silences, I haven't exactly been lazy. Over the past few months, I've been rebuilding certain pieces of stock. And certain engines are also being rebuilt, so expect those later. But these right here are the Maunsell coaches. The ones ever so infamously seen throughout the entirety of Thompson Friends. Literally. The only thing that came close to basically rivaling them in presence was the branch line coaches. They had a bit of a change, so hey, But, yeah, as you can see here, I've updated their side panels and linings because something that nobody ever really noticed whenever these things showed up, in the rare chance they do, was that my stupid numpty face had forgotten that they weren't mirrored. Because something special about the Maunsell stock was that these coaches, as you can imagine, one side with the corridor has smaller windows, while the other side without it has the bigger windows for the passengers to see out of. And my old models didn't have that. Until now. Yes, look at that. So you can have your asymmetrical natured express for your liking. But before we get into the nitty-gritty details of the lore, let's start with a quick summary of the real-life history. So, the Maunsell's tale begins in 1925 when the first order was placed. And from that first order, Southern Railway would go on to produce over 1,200 coaches, making a total of 139 sets for their use on passenger express services, Suburbans, you can name it. And most of these things saw service up until 1967. Probably one of the final years you'd ever see them, and potentially hauled by a final steam service. Who knows? But, yeah, that is a very brief and brisk brush-up with their history. But, as you know, since this is a Railway Series custom, there's a bit of a different lore to these things, especially considering how many ended up on Sudrian Isles. So, I'll start it off by saying it right off the bat. Basically, Sir Topham Hatt pulls some strings. Sir Charles I, who was in control at the time, he, in the same way as how a lot of CMEs would know each other and comment on what each other's doing, and they'd seek each other out to help work out issues, I feel like Sir Topham Charles Hatt I would have basically had ties to more or less every railway CME. Like, he probably more or less helped Stanier in some way, helped Churchward. He was basically silver-tongued, and he has done a lot of favors. So, as you can imagine, doing a lot of favors scores him not only a lot of engines, but a lot of rolling stock. And when these things first started rolling out in 25, 26, the big man went up and said, "Hey, could I get some of those?" And the Southern Railroad was like, "Yeah, sure, we kind of owe you one, because you helped our CME once." And so, ba-bam. They got the blueprints and their own rake to obviously test it out. And after test was complete, they started building them at Crovan's Gate, because in the Railway Series, or NWRS universe, Crovan's Gate and Solder as a whole is a bit more bigger and industrial. So no need to really... Once you get a set of a certain type of rolling stock, from there it's just a matter of copy the design and bam, you can start producing it on your own. Though obviously with certain engines they can't do that, because, rarity. But from there on, that number of 1,200 in real life would jump up to 3,200 in the fictional verse, because these things made up a lot of both the NWR stock, but there were also some sold off to other railways, which also fetched the NWR a pretty penny, especially during the Depression. So, yeah. At one point in time, you could basically see these things almost everywhere outside of the southern region, in Barrel and Furnace and Midlands. You could probably see them on the East Coast at one point. Just depended on who wanted some and whether they went to Crovan's Gate or not to buy any. Hell, Spencer's private coaches for a bit were, in fact, these things before he himself fell under the fold of NWR. So, yeah, these things get around, and as you can tell by the liveries, something else has changed, and it's going to be like this. This ratio of 2 red liveried versus 1 green livery is kind of how I intend to keep it, because in my mind, if the NWR is going to run a service that runs towards London, you're going to want a color that stands out. And looking at the engines, you can tell that they already have that done with the head of the motive power. Looking at Azure, yeah, that's his new name, because I've decided to do a thing that you will find out in the future. Looking at Rebecca, and looking at Hero, they all have colors that make them pop a bit. Hero less so, but that's because he's usually on goods work. So, green itself, while a good color, doesn't necessarily pop. It doesn't pop. However, the red is usually used for alarms for a good reason, because it grabs your attention, it grabs your eye. So in my mind, the red rakes are usually used on the premier services to help sort of draw in the attention and, you know, look over here, it's an express service. Whereas the greens are usually used on slightly slower services, like say ones that stop a bit more or go to places like Manchester over the Woodhead, because that's a thing. Deal with it. So yeah, it'll be something like this, but you'll see it be inverted for actual purpose-built Suburban stock later, let me assure you now. So, with that covered, these things would have had a service life up into the 70s, because it was after the introduction of the Mark 1s that in 62 the NWR would buy some, and then from there go on to produce them the same way they did with these things. And they'd have their last hurrah on the Wild Northwester service towards St. Pancras. So, yeah, they had a definitely decent career, and of course, quite a few of them are still preserved. Some of which are in a museum in Vickerstown, which you could probably see today. But most of the stock you'll see now are of the Mark I category or Midland category. So yes, enjoy that. And this is pretty much all I've got to cover with you. Again, sorry for being a lazy slob, but as I've told you, I'm not exactly sitting on my tuttle whenever I'm not uploading. I'm still doing things. And again, I also must thank you all for breaching 100 subscribers. Now I know I'm going to do that whole generic, "Oh, thank you very much, this means so much to me" speech, right? Not quite. I don't think there are enough words to put into how thankful I am. So instead, I'm going to be uploading a series of specials, filmed with the help of a friend of mine, known as Eskel, you may know him. And of course, that friend I would not have met if not for a certain Mag. You better know him. He sticks around here. He'll find you. So, expect to see a lot of more activity in the coming week, especially considering how I'll be free, seeing as I am about to become unemployed. So, with that being said, this has been the Dark Shops, and I'll see ye lot next time. Have a good one.